The Front Row Back Row podcast is a show where two grad school buddies discuss physical therapy entrepreneurship. I helped guide a company to an 8-figure exit, and I'm now starting my own mobile company. Brian grew his mobile practice to 4 clinics, and he's now doing $1 million in revenue. Join us as we help you grow your own business. Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell, and with me as always is Dr. Brian Wolf. And we are Physiogrowth. So today our episode is going to be about schedule mechanics and how you can see one-on-one patients and still make it work financially in insurance. I think Brian's company Evolution has a great way of doing it. And today we're going to talk you through how. So we are Physiogrowth. Physiogrowth is a mastermind mentorship group with me and Brian. Brian has taken his company from back of the car all the way to 5 clinics and $2 million in annual revenue. And I have done the opposite. I took insurance-based clinics. I built them up and scaled them to the point of a pretty good, successful exit. And now I'm starting my own cash-based company. So this podcast today, we are going to go and we're going to look at, for you PT entrepreneurs and people trying to figure out, how do I get my schedule to make my PTs happy, right? And how do I retain my PTs so I don't have to be on Indeed every single day of the week? And how do I also make sure that I keep the money rolling in? So I think Evolution has a really good framework for it. And Brian, I'd like you to just kind of tell us what you guys do very blunt, very, broadly, right? As if you were having a 30-second conversation with me as another PT at a conference, and then we'll break that down and what that means.
Cool. I can even do it easier. I mean, we take insurance, right, as an insurance-based provider, and we do 40-minute sessions, and that's it. I mean, okay. When you look at the mechanics, we'll talk specifically about it, but it's really not very simple. It's like, I think when you were talking about it, there's obviously a lot of other pieces to it, but I think, we can walk through the mechanics specifically of how it works and why it works and why we went this way. But the overarching thought process was, this is what our physical therapist wanted. And so to Owen's aspect of what we talked about is, this was the, if you look at 45-minute sessions, hour sessions, 30, 60, 15 minutes, whatever you break it down and how you do it, text, no text, this has worked really well for us, and it's been a great thing to attract physical therapists. But it also has been really great for us in the standpoint of retaining them too.
Okay. So yeah, and for all the listeners who may not know, half of Brian's business is cash-based. He does a lot of work in fitness, a lot of these other kind of cash services, and he's built his reputation based on fitness too. So that'll come into play later. So my wheelhouse is operations, mechanics, how to make a schedule work. So this is fascinating for me. So I'm just going to hopefully break it down as succinctly as I can without getting too numbersy, right? So yep. Brian does 40-minute one-to-one sessions, right? So if you do the math on that, I'll do the quick math, is that if every single person shows up, one therapist in an 8-hour day will see 12 people, right? So your big box places, right, the names that you all probably know about, the national chains, most of them are somewhere around like 11 to 15, right, depending on who you work for. Patients in an 8-hour day that the PT is responsible for. And they usually have a tech, right? Some don't, but most have a tech or two on the floor helping, right? And if you do the math on that, and I've done the quick math for you, 40 minutes is 3 codes, right? Whereas most of those other places, they encourage you to do a full hour, right? But yep. you have a patient or two in there. Every PT's kind of seen this model, right? So if you do the math out on that, let's say the best case scenario is 11 visits, right? In 11 visits, right, the therapist is going to see 4 units. So that's 44 units that a therapist will produce in a day. Right. In Brian's model, 12 visits, but only 3 units, right? So that's 36. So Brian is just straight up taking a haircut on 8 units. And
that's something I will actually, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, but that's what I'm saying is I'm setting it up for that because you're not actually taking a haircut.
No.
So tell me why, and I want to understand this so that other clinic owners can kind of see a different perspective, because man, you might have only had one job and that's how they did it. So that's how you set up your company, right? I want to see how you make that math work.
Yeah. So like when you think about the average amount of visits, so like when you're thinking purely from the Medicare model, right? When you think about that aspect. So realize that we take, 15% of our practice is Medicare. So the reality is, like, when it comes to private insurances, you can play around with different, you know, aspects of what the units look like. Our
Yep.
averages across the board, again, do that math for it real quick because I like the way you did that, is about 3.4 units per
Yeah.
physical therapist. That's our
Yeah,
sweet
because
spot.
there's some units, like I know in Arizona, Blue Cross Blue Shield, like if you do
Exactly.
a minimum of 10, that's a unit. So you could get 4 units out of 40 visits. So yeah, you should be a little bit over three. And
Yeah,
I'll tell you, from the big box places, like trying to get people to bill four, honestly, their average is usually 3.8. So you're
yeah,
actually not that far off.
exactly. So when you look at the 12, right, you're close to 41, right? So to your point about 41, and to your point now, you just so 41 units per PT, along with the fact that you were just talking about. So at 3.8 times how many, Owen? How many did you have? You said
That's
for
they want
11.
to get 11 visits,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you
So
right now, not every single person is producing 11
yeah.
visits a day.
So exactly. So to give you the numbers of how close the gap is, you went from what you just explained in reality is probably 41.8. That's what I
Yep.
have as a math on my calculator here, and then
Yep.
ours was 40.8. So it's
Yeah.
1 unit difference per therapist. So again, it's like when you think about the way that we do that on that aspect, it's really only 1 unit. And here's the kicker for those of you guys listening. The reality is a lot of our insurance contracts, a lot of these insurance companies now, these dirt bags are moving, and yes, I said it that way, is all moving towards a just per day model, meaning
Mhm.
like we have set rates with certain insurance companies like Connecticut and Aetna that just say here's the flat rate. Same thing with United Healthcare and Cigna; they're all moving towards that. So really, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Medicare are per unit. So the reality is, then you're looking at the average cost. You're looking at the average aspect of like what we're getting in reimbursement per visit, right? And so a lot of that comes down to some other things that we do, some things we take in network, out of network, how we play around with it. But we're ever changing on what that looks like and how that landscape works.
Well, and
So that's something we're doing.
I think from like in an operations nerd standpoint too. So you're already telling me, because we're talking full schedule versus full schedule, right?
Yeah.
Full schedule, no cancellations, perfect billing therapist, like, or not perfect billing therapist, because these are average numbers. So you have your people who will bill an extra, who won't, who'll forget which insurance it is. So what can
Yeah.
they do on the software or whatever, right? So let's just say your average numbers, but this is then we have to talk about the big dog in the room is cancellation rates,
Yeah.
right? And this is where I think I like your model, and I'm not just trying to blow smoke, but like,
Yeah.
because you're already not terribly far off in units per visit, right? That actually
Yep.
show up. But my guess is, with being one on one, you probably have. I mean, like, what's your cancellation rate?
So it hovers always around 5 to 10%. And I'll
Yeah.
be
Okay.
honest
So
with you.
that's
Yeah.
that's good though,
Yeah.
because most big box it's 15,
Yeah.
15 and up.
And here's the reality of like over the years, I've heard cancellation rates and people talk about cancellation rates. That's not a number I truly dissect on a regular basis, to be honest with you. And it's not that it's not important. I don't want it to sound like it's not important. And there's probably people being like, "What do you mean you don't know it off the top of your head?" But the reality is, there's a lot of shit that you can't control when it comes to cancellation
Mhm.
rates, right?
Yep.
I think actually that if you have a stacked clinic, like if you've got some, like where it's like where people say, "Oh, well, now if your cancellations are better," because there's probably a sweet spot in there of like 80% to 85% productivity, right? But the reality is, when you look at cancellation rates, again, they drastically go down at 40-minute sessions where they're working one-on-one with therapists and whatnot. But again, like we're in the Northeast, it's colder right now, snow days, people are getting sick more often. It wouldn't shock me if it's going up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Coming in like the summer months, people going on vacation, people changing utilization rates. Overall, I would say our cancellation rate hovers in that like 10%. Do I have give or take? Does it sometimes creep to 12? Does it sometimes creep down to 8? I'm sure it does, but it's not one of those things where I'm like, hey, the quality of care and the system we have set up is not utilizing it. I personally think that cancellation rates go up when physical therapists are shittier human beings. And I said it exactly the way I said it. I said exactly the way that I said it. It's not about and I can tell you a story because we had a physical therapist last year who was working for us that left, thank God. But you look at her utilization rate, great physical therapist, couldn't give a shit about her treating her patients in the clinic, and it showed drastically on
Mhm.
people dropping off. And we've gotten a lot of feedback after she's left of people calling back with bills being like, I don't want to pay because I had this bad experience and blah, blah. And so what happens is I think when you look at cancellation rates, you want to look specifically for, I look a lot for average utilization for visits per physical therapist. That to me is a very key indicator.
Yeah.
So if I like the national average is 11, you know, some people say, oh, right now I'm seeing like, you know, patients for 5 or 6 visits and I'm getting them better. No, you're not. You're just
You're
not
decreasing their pain, but you're not increasing their function.
1,000%. Like the reason why in our entire career, Owen, that 11 has never changed is because there's physiological aspects to that, right?
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, when it does decrease, it's much more likely that the physical therapist kind of sucks or is having a lot of trouble creating rapport with patients versus those who are like in that 11, 12, 13, 14 range. Those people aren't like, and again, like this, I went to physical therapy school because one of our professors once told me the best physical therapist will get somebody better in 6 visits. B, physical therapist will get them better at 8. And then C will get them better in 10. I think it's a total fucking miss on physical therapy opinions, personally. I think a lot of it has to do with the rapport that you build with your patients. So that's just my personal opinion. But
and especially in the orthopedic setting, right? Like where we're not just taking pain away, but we also are trying to like get them back to hiking, running, jumping, you know, all the stuff. I mean, you're a sports clinic, so even more, right? But like that's where I think if anybody's listening to this and try and take away is that you can have different models, you can work different ways, you know, but I think that if you got to see what the biggest problem in your business is going to be in the next 5 years, and that I can almost guarantee you it's going to be hiring and retaining, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking and saying, okay, how can I solve my I can't find a therapist problem? I mean, how many people have talked to us? Like we have 3 or 4 people a week that are like, well, yeah, but I need a therapist. That's my problem, right?
Yeah.
And I will say, for a lot of places, they are doing it right. And there is absolutely a shortage and they're in an area where it's tough and, you know, there's all these things. But if the guy down the street from you is getting all the people, right? You want to think, okay, is my model matching what my therapists want, right? And what my patients want, right? You know, to get, because a happy therapist, honestly, they're happy when the patients show up and do what they say and get better and they feel like they're giving everything they can. And I mean, honestly, I don't even want to say if you're good enough, like if you just focus for 40 minutes, you can get somebody better, right? Like
100%.
10 minutes of that is the bike, you know, and and probably 80% of the clinics around the country anyway. So you're only doing 50 minutes there anyway. So these are the things that I always encourage people in our mastermind group to think about when they say, I have this problem and this is a big problem for everybody and it's a problem for me. So woe is me. Right. And I say, okay, how can everyone has the same problem? So are you just going to go to the grave like everyone else? Right. So these are the types of things that we want to like kind of encourage people to do who are listening to this podcast, who are in our mastermind group. These are the things we'll help you do. Right. Because believe me, I've been in Clinton, dude. I think I told you before the podcast started, I was in a company where when I first came in, they started with, if your insurance, like they would tell this to the patient, your insurance pays 5 units, you get a 75-minute appointment. And then the next person that walked in, they had a per diem appointment and they got 30 minutes. Right. And every therapist did it. And it was just, sorry, your insurance doesn't pay us. So we're not giving you care. And that's hard, right? Like that's a challenging thing when somebody literally only has one choice. They can only pay premiums at one company, and that company just happens to reimburse PT a little bit differently. Like, we lost a lot of people based on that.
Totally, because here's the mechanics, right? There's a bunch of different pieces to kind of break it down a little bit more specifically and get a little tactical here, right?
Yeah.
When you think about 40-minute sessions and what that does, and honestly, listen, like this is an aspect. Like here's the thing: we've had a few physical therapists that have left us to go to cash-based clinics, or like, and like for me, I think that's really dumb personally, because if you're an insurance-based practice that has a, you know, again, a 40-minute model, the whole reason for why you would leave to go to a cash-based practice would be more from a perspective of like, again, I guess to take more time with your patients, but like you're not in that 30-60 model. You're not having to see a tech and have to hand that off. The bigger thing that happens, again, for a lot of cash-based practices is that you're limited because of the money that that people have to pay. So the reality is like your pool is just a little bit smaller, which is fine, but just realize that your patient population is smaller. Like, no offense to any of those cash PTs out there, and Owen's one of these guys that, like, again, is a cash PT right now, but we've been very transparent about, you know, the potential plan for Owen to go into the insurance realm at some point. The reality of what makes a lot of sense is, like, I work with New York City Football Club, I work in professional sports, I work with athletes. If someone tears their ACL, you're competing with me as a cash-based practice to go, and like, you think that person who has to go through ACL rehab gives a crap about the fact that they're getting 20 minutes more with the cash-based person? No, I'm going to win. I probably 99 times out of 100, right? Maybe we'll get the one, but the reality is, like, so.
And then if you are competing in cash, the fact that
Yeah.
you guys do 40 minutes one-on-one,
Yeah.
no other
Heck yeah.
person in the room, like if you're competing with an insurance with that, and then, you know, I agree with you, man. Like, I love
Yeah.
my patients. I love spending time with them and all that, but the custom is an hour. Nobody and
Totally.
me driving around and all that stuff. Like, the last thing
Yeah.
I want to do is go 40-minute appointments. But I dude, of the 1 hour, I'm chatting about their kids. I'm talking to
Yeah,
them. Like,
sure.
and everyone says, "Oh, that's building therapeutic alliance." Like, no, I mean, it is, but you can also be a cool guy in 40 minutes.
Exactly.
You know,
100%. I built
like,
plenty of rapport in 40 minutes. And what
yeah.
I would say in the 40-minute sessions that's so key about this when it comes to the insurance side of it is you can stack them up back to back to back to get the 12 in. If you go to 45, you can really only get 10 in. So that's the awesome in an 8-hour day. It attracts physical therapists. You don't need techs. So, like, one of the things that we looked at was we used to be 60-30, so we'd see 16 patients a day, but PTs would have their own tech. Well, the reality is you're paying that tech and losing those 4 visits. One, yeah, there is you make a little bit more money on the 60-30. However, in my opinion, what we found, we had PTs who were losing because they had poor relationships with their techs and didn't like the people they were working with. And so every PT that we've ever had is unanimously said we would much rather just work and have more time with our patients. And again, that's what, in my opinion, will lead more people towards that cash model, right? Or in that model, because you don't have to hand your patients off to a tech. You get to treat your patients. You get to do the manual work. You do all that stuff. So to me, that's why it's so nice. Is it's really a toss up to a certain degree when it comes down to, like, the units, the utilization, whatnot. It's the model I would go to. If I was running a cash practice, I would also run the exact same thing. Again, because now, say Owen saying, hey, for an hour, I'm charging $175. Well, to come see me, I can charge $115, $130, right? I can be less, and I get 40
If I
minutes.
had brick and mortar, I'd probably go to 40.
Totally, because you can utilize more. You can, and it's more efficient timing wise. You know what I mean?
And the other thing too, and I mean, the elephant in the room with you guys is that you made the smart decision of, we are a fitness company and a PT company.
Exactly.
So even if it blows up in your face, right? And you guys are tweaking, you're constantly doing all that stuff, you know, having that something that people are used to paying cash for as part of your business insulates you, right?
Totally.
And I think it's a great idea, obviously,
100%.
but like that's another thing that anybody listen to this, and kind of my final thought here is, you have to start offering cash services to insulate yourself, because, you know, even though we're talking the numbers and units and all that stuff, each unit's getting less and less reimbursed, usually every year, right? So that's the nice thing about cash services and building out your cash side of your businesses. It allows you to be PT focused, right? Like, you can help your guys out. So.
And the reality of this, Owen, is I could talk about this all day, and we could make this another hour long about why there's differences and what different companies are doing and why it's working, why it's not working, and what cash-based services work. And the way this kind of kicked off was Owen was talking about, people are interested in AI and Medicare and blah, blah, and all this stuff. And it's such a fucking boring conversation, in my opinion, for a podcast. But if you want, we can talk about it and help people do it, because I think there's individual stuff and individual basis. So we want to do something that actually was tactical to help people, whether you're a physical therapist working for somebody or a cash-based physical therapy practice or opening up something. This is what we do at Physio Growth. So the reality is, like, we help people learn the different skills to help make more money and become more valuable within the physical therapy profession. So if you're somebody who wants to join this, physio-growth.com, check it out. Happy to talk through this process. Owen and I have a plethora of stuff we can chat about to help and create different value in different ways.
we've seen all the scheduling models there are out there, man.
Exactly. and can successfully break them all down, right? And the pitfalls, and then actually get in the weeds of what's pros and cons of that. So totally.
There you go. Is the gray showing in my beard right now? All right.
Oh no.
So
the snow, this, as my son calls it, the snow is in my beard right now. Too,
there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And with that, we are out, my friend. Have a good one.
Cool. See you, man.